All right, thank you all for joining me for this discussion of beauty. For me, the idea of discussing beauty and art conjures up images of historical figures debating the virtues of art and universal standards of judgment. But today the word beauty is not heard that frequently, and it feels a bit nebulous to me. So I was wondering if we could start the conversation. I'd just like to ask you, like, what do you mean when you use the word beauty in the context of looking and making at art, and what makes something beautiful to you?
Anybody want to jump in? I could jump in.
Thanks, Emmanuel.
Yeah, I've been thinking about this, and I feel like it's really difficult to answer. I find it really hard to describe, to describe what about something is beautiful to me. One of the things I've been sort of settling on is that there's a relationship between the beautiful and the complex for me. That if there's enough complexity in an object, in a person, in a place, in an event, I think I can sort of start to find that beautiful. And in thinking about things that I found beautiful, like even just thinking about paintings, like they're usually not paintings that are very, like the word I would use would be like easy, like paintings that are like quick, like it's very quick for me to understand what's going on. It's very quick for me to understand the materiality or how it was made. I tend to find things that are a little bit difficult, beautiful. So there's this relationship for me with beautiful and the complex. And so I think maybe when I see or claim or I say that something is beautiful or have an experience of something that's beautiful, I think for me what kind of is true there is that there's a complexity that I appreciate in the thing.
It's almost like the nuance of something is beckoning you to look even longer.
Yeah, it's compelling,
Mm-hmm.
If it's too easy, maybe then there's really nothing to hold my attention.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I can speak a little bit to just add on what Emmanuel said as well. I think he was mentioning that like beauty to him is a placeholder to hold all these complex things. It's not holding just one thing. And I think a lot about beauty as it usually being something that is very subjective, and therefore no one can really rely on someone's idea or definition of beauty. But I think that's all in the sense of the meaning of the word, in the sense that it can hold all these subjective truths, and in that it becomes universal and it becomes pure.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I can really appreciate that.
Yeah, I think you're touching on something important there, that like beauty ultimately comes from some internal place, perhaps some internal judgment.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. For me, when Emmanuel was talking about something being compelling, what is like visually beautiful to me is something that's like stimulating and like exciting to look at, and maybe something that I have to like mentally work through, like what formally is like beautiful about it to me. And also I think there has to be this element of like charm or like uniqueness to something that's beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree. Like I feel like beauty is not like some like fleeting attraction to something, like Manuel, like you're saying, it's like something that holds your attention for a little bit longer. But yeah, it's hard to pin down like what exactly it will be that will hold my attention. Recently I find myself thinking a lot about like things that shapeshift like with your attention. Like the longer you look, the more it sort of reminds you of something else. And I feel like I'm like kind of looking for those things that sort of transform with your attention. And I'm just interested in the power of your own subjectivity and how you bring that to a thing, and how that subjectivity has the power to change the appearances and surfaces of things.
I guess like when you open things up, Meg, you talked about how beauty is not necessarily really talked about these days, and like I guess I'm just curious why people think that is. Like it seems like the concept of beauty is kind of poo-pooed or something. Like why? Or do people even like feel that way? Like I think sometimes when I talk about my art, my work, I hesitate to include, you know, a desire for beauty in the way I talk about my work, because that feels maybe like, yeah, like that won't be appreciated or something. I don't know if people resonate with that.
Yeah, I think there's like, it feels like there's a general suspicion sometimes about art. Like if something is being aestheticized, it implies that the thing being aestheticized wasn't good enough to kind of stand on its own. Or there are questions that arise about like, well, like beautiful for who and like to what end? Go ahead.
Sorry, I have a very, I trouble with the word suspicion. I think it has a negative connotation. And I think, you know, when we're talking about the suspicion of beauty, I think we're talking about critically looking at all sides of where this end result of how we define beauty and how we attach it to an experience, an object, or a painting. But for me, suspicion is like, it's very difficult for me to grapple with, because it's coming from this place where, like, when I say I'm suspicious of you, that means like, oh, you don't have a good intention behind that. And I guess I'm such a naive person that when I think about beauty, that people don't throw around the term beauty very often, because it has something that's really profound attached to it. And I don't know, I all I'm trying to say is that I guess I'm really suspicious of the word suspicious.
Fair enough.
Yeah, like I wonder if it's like I'm thinking about like some experiences I've had where I'm like, that's like too nice. Like, are you like, maybe there is a sense that like, are you trying to hide something? Like, is the work? And I've had experiences where I felt this way about my work, where it feels like, okay, maybe the work isn't critical enough if it's like dressed up, you know, or like hidden behind this,
There's kind of
aestheticization or something, you know.
There's like a lazy form of beauty. Like maybe it's beauty isn't even the right word yet, because like what you're talking about seems
more critical,
so much greater than this. But there's a lazy beauty that's like not internal to the work, but some sort of like external makeup that people put on art to like hide maybe not necessarily a very deep investigation of something.
I think that's what it is for me, is that like when you call something beautiful in art, it's like making it seem superficial, or like there's no conceptual complexity behind it. But I don't think that's the case.
Yeah, I do think it's I don't know, like making something look good is not a very egregious sin in my mind, but it does seem important to kind of remain critical of something that feels attractive, and being aware of how it's directing your attention to a certain thing. Not because it's necessarily suspicious, but it's the kind of visual literacy that can allow you to kind of enter and understand the mechanics of a work maybe a little bit better.
I think that's why it can sometimes be useful. It's like a lure. It like tricks you to like paying attention, and then maybe like bringing something deeper in underneath that veil of beauty.
I think a lot of that lazy sense of beauty, or that very fast attention grabbing beauty, Meg, that you mentioned, goes into the commodification of that, like in marketing, advertising, that it's just a thing to grab your attention, you know?
I kind of feel like beauty is, or what someone finds attractive is sort of an index of people's experiences of pleasure or influences they have. So I was wondering if you guys could share a bit about your aesthetic influences. What are some of the artists, musicians, writers, whoever that you admire, things that you find beautiful?
I can share my screen to show you an example of what I kind of thought was beautiful.
Thanks, yeah.
So right now I am sharing a video of the finale of the Swan Lake Ballet with the score of Tchaikovsky. And maybe I'll play it on mute. The reason why I think when I was thinking about something to show as beautiful, I often think about beauty as like something that is really complex and has the ability to hold a lot of things. And for me, the Swan Lake Ballet in itself, it's so, you know, it's a theater, it's a drama, there's beauty in dance and form and so many layers of the dance itself. But there's something about the narrative where there is a conflict, a resolution, and then there's a tragedy. But in that you find beauty. And often I do find, you know, in my own personal practice, when I am using symbols that I want to convey a universal sense of beauty, that I use these symbols that convey exactly what I'm talking about, where the symbol is not simply just beautiful because it is aesthetically pleasing and it brings about the sensational feeling of pleasure, but there's something more behind it. There's always pain, there's suffering. You know, when I use like roses in my paintings, I mean just that, because roses have thorns and you know, they're used for protection, they're dangerous, they hurt, they cause pain. So that's why I wanted to show Swan Lake, because they're just that whole ballet has the ability to hold so many things that I would describe as beauty.
It like has the capacity to hold like all of those aspects of the human experience. Yeah. Great. And you'll bring out the Doig.
Well, no, I was gonna show the Doig piece, but now I want to show something else. So I'll try to find it really quickly.
Okay.
But something like what you just said, Yen, made me think about like, and maybe this is too broad a question, but like the relationship between beauty and truth. How sometimes like, you know, if something feels like, going back to this idea of like too easy or whatever, but like, yeah, to have an experience that doesn't acknowledge the reality of, you know, pain and suffering and the whole gamut of human experience, but only acknowledges like, you know, maybe the niceness or the hopefulness or whatever. Like, I don't know if that finds resonance with what you're saying, where that feels kind of empty or like that feels empty in a way, whereas a beautiful thing or like is able to encapsulate, like hold the whole gamut, even the things that we might easily dismiss as like not beautiful. Actually, that's what leads to actually like a fullness of beauty. I don't know if that resonates with what you were saying.
100%. And I find that sometimes when beauty is described as pleasurable, meaning that you had to do something to seek out this pleasurable experience, or you first encountered this pleasurable object, and therefore it's like a cause and effect thing for me, at least when I'm looking at pleasure as a feeling. But when I look at beauty, it's not a cause or effect thing, it's the whole human experience, which is yeah, exactly what I felt that you were saying. Yeah.
It's really cool. I will share this painting. Can you guys see that?
Yes.
This is Bonnard's, I don't know how to say the name in French, but you can see it here. But it's a painting of Bonnard's that's at the Art Gallery of Ontario. And I've been thinking about this painting a lot recently, because I never really used to like, I never actually used to consider Bonnard's work beautiful. I thought it was too easy in many ways. Like I was like, the colors are too bright. Like it just feels like too, like, I don't know. It was too nice. It was too nice. And I encountered this painting by chance one day, walking through the AGO. I was actually going to go see like the Francis Bacon paintings they had up at the time. And I thought those were really beautiful because they were gritty and like they acknowledged, you know, the shits in life. And I was like, that's beautiful stuff. And I passed by this painting in the hallway I just passed by this painting, and like a few steps later, I like stopped in my tracks and I was like, wait, was that actually a figure in here? Like I didn't see this figure initially. So I like went back and like I stood in front of this painting, and then things just started to emerge. Like I didn't see this figure initially. Like I didn't really understand how the space was working. And then like, honestly, I feel like there's a figure like over here, you know, but the painting is titled like, I think like the translation is like garden landscape with 2 children.
Mhm.
But it took me probably like 10 minutes to like see this third figure. So earlier when we were talking about like, what was the word? Like something is transformed with the attention that we give to it. Like it's able to hold our attention and it transforms in front of us. I feel like this paint, like that's why I changed my mind. I was like, no, I got to talk about this painting, because that I had that experience with this painting, and that changed the game for me in my relationship with Bernard's work, where I feel like his paintings kind of challenge me to look slowly, like to actually try and go deeper than what's initially on the surface. And usually there's something else that I couldn't initially see.
That's great. Maybe I'll share some of the music that I wanted to talk about. So this one of the things I find really beautiful is the sacred harp choral music. And historically, it was developed in New England and became really popular in like rural American South. And it is associated with Christian revival services of those times. And it's very participatory in that the music is composed and performed in a way that animates like each singer equally. So I'll just play you a little sample here. So yeah, to me, the music is really beautiful in a visceral way. And I think I was primed to kind of enjoy this sort of music growing up in a community that did a lot of 4-part hymn singing. And yeah, so it's beautifully ecstatic, but I also think there's something really intense and dark, like lurking there in the music as well. It feels kind of haunted by like some sort of human desperation for looking for something, something else. Yeah, if I could ever make artwork that was half as beautiful and terrifying, I think I could die happy.
Beautiful and terrifying. I like that. Okay, I guess I'll share my screen now in terms of what I'm thinking about as beautiful. So for me, like thinking about this like transformation that we're talking about, it's not the thing itself that transforms, it's like your perception of that thing, or like your own perspective and understanding of it. So I started thinking about these like scallop shapes with this painting behind me, which comes from like the flap of a mailbox, and then thinking about like where else I see those shapes repeated. So I became really interested in these like little garden fences. And to me, they're beautiful because they're just such an odd object, and there's something like very fragile and odd about them. Like they feel almost pathetic. And I like that like in the space, like in the real world, they also feel like these like line drawings just like inserted into a space. And I like when things like consider beauty as like an integral part of their design, like they're intentionally designed to be like pleasurable to look at, but also like beauty as something that can be functional. So in this case, it's like the scallopy rounded edge is like protecting you from this pointy bit. So yeah, for me, I am thinking about beauty in like those different ways of it being somehow useful, or like somehow incorporated into our daily lives as something that's important to like our well-being, I suppose. That's maybe what it is. And in terms of like your earlier question, Meg, I've been thinking a lot about pleasure activism, that text by Adrienne Marie Brown. And thinking about beauty as pleasure, as something that's like important to well-being, and yeah, just how we move in the world and like what makes life worth living.
That's great. So yeah, all of you have been working with like found source material to prompt a lot of your art making. Like Kelly, you work a lot with patterns, and yeah, and I know you've been sourcing text to images from your neighborhood, and Manuel, you've been photographing other people's gardens. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about what draws you to those sources. Are you looking for something beautiful, or are there other considerations, aesthetic or otherwise? And
Mhm.
I think maybe that's what I'm searching for. It's like, why do I find these things beautiful? Like, what is it that draws me to them? And then in recreating them, it's sort of like trying to figure that out, or to like capture that essence.
Mhm.
Mm.
Yeah, I would piggyback on that and say a similar thing. Like I've been thinking a lot about like what makes me like I go for walks and I see kind of like people's front lawn gardens, and I'll pull out my cell phone and document it. And I've been like asking myself like, what makes me stop? Like why do I stop at a particular section and take that photograph? Um, and yeah, I don't fully know, and I think a lot of what happens in the studio of trying to recreate the image, trying to like recall the experience and bring all of that to bear in the artwork is this thing of trying to figure out, yeah, like what is it that was compelling about the space. I think I'm drawn to gardens because I find them beautiful, and the reason why I find them beautiful is because I think they are just inherently just like packed with so much complexity. Like it's natural, it's nature, but it's constructed. You can sort of see the human hand, but when you're in a garden, you can kind of choose to suspend your disbelief and just experience the natural. You know, the part of what brings a garden into existence is death, and so embedded in the reality of a garden is the continual cycle. And so there's just all this, I think, just like richness in the garden space that draws me to garden spaces initially, but like on an aesthetic level, like why I take the picture in the first place, like that's something I'm still trying to figure out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I guess to also comment on what Emmanuel said, like I feel like, you know, speaking to Emmanuel about his paintings, particularly him as a painting, I resonate in the sense that when I started painting, it's a liberating experience for me because you are able to really take control and you have full agency in creating this pictorial space from the experiences of how you encounter beauty, which I think is really fantastic. Like what a privilege to have as an artist. And a lot of my work last semester had to do with using a lot of signage from the neighborhood spots that I used to be in precarious situations from. But I like to say that, you know, I think painting, for me at least, is beyond this like typical sense of self-expression. And it's like very naive sense where you're just painting what you feel. I think for me, it's also finding that sense of pain or, you know, sense of discomfort that I have in finding these images from my everyday world and translating them into beautiful pictures when in the first place they're not necessarily beautiful. I think
Mm-hmm.
is a really, I think is my role as an artist and the work that I make.
What about you, Meg, in relationship with your work?
Yeah, thanks, Emmanuel. I've been working with found material from local archives, and I think initially what drew me to some of the drawings and images that I found there was like I saw the same kind of mix of like that beauty and darkness that I heard in the sacred harp music. And but now I feel like I'm more curious about more compelled to continue investigating them because I'm curious about like why people have collected like these particular fragments from the past and why certain images and ideas seem to be maintained while like others are forgotten.
Yeah, the thing that's really interesting about that for me, like in hearing what you've all said, is this. I feel like we circle back to the subjectivity issue. You know, how it seems like so much of what we find compelling about things or beautiful, there is a relational aspect to it. Like we have this relationship to it. So like your relationship to the music as part of like your familial narrative, Kelly, you seeing these things, seeing this pattern, and then that kind of like you have this awareness and like ability to notice the beauty in those things, and you kind of start chasing it. And then same with Yen as well, in thinking about like your experiences of these spaces, like that kind of. So I don't know. I feel like I'm just coming back to the relational aspect of the beautiful. Like maybe that's part of what is embedded in the nuance of beauty, is this idea that like there is a connectedness that we feel because of experiences or culture or whatever.
Yeah, I think that's part of my curiosity in going back to these images, even though I might not find them as compelling maybe as I once did. There's still this lingering question of why people ever did, or why I did in the first place. Maybe a last question for all of you is, do you find any pleasure in transforming these found materials? I think, Yan, you started to touch on this already. Do you hope that, like in the process of making art, is that a pleasurable experience for you, or do you are you looking for something else, or is it something else entirely?
I really wish I could answer with my full heart and full honesty and truth, and that, painting gives me pleasure, but it's not exactly a pleasurable experience for me. It's just not. And but that's the whole thing about what I think about beauty. That embodies me as the role as the painter, using these source materials, imagery that I encounter in my life, my autobiographical experiences, and then translating it to the pictorial space. I feel like that just talks about my role as an artist in this world, is that it is not all about pleasure for me, based on like my experiences, which are often precarious, violent, angry, chaotic, I want to make a painting that is not any of those things, but still can hold those experiences when it forces you and you are compelled to look at it. It holds you for more than an instant. So I think that relates to my definition of beauty, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, painting can be very painful. But I feel like there are a few moments. I feel like what keeps me in it, and I mean, just artistic practice is also just tough. Like, be that the reality of being in the studio day in, day out, or the reality of being able to be in the studio and everything else that one has to do to get to that point. It's tough. But there are these moments where things just sort of like surprise you, like a painting, a drawing, an object just sort of like surprises you, and you're like, you were so weird. And those moments I'm like, damn, I'm glad I showed up today, like just so I could I could experience that thing, that like awkward emergence of a thing that like even I sometimes didn't really expect, or I'm like, I had hoped for it, but I didn't know if it would happen. And then it happens and you're like, oh my, like, thank you,
I feel that.
Yeah, I feel like there can be some pleasure at the initial like idea, and pleasure at that kind of that magic moment when something strange happened unexpectedly, but there's a lot of just pain and hard work in the middle.
Yeah.
Just to add to that, I feel like, Emmanuel, that's also how you describe like you encountering these gardens that you photographed too. Like, you're never gonna know whether you're gonna run into a beautiful space or a garden that you really can make that connection with. And when you do, it is pure. That moment is profound. I feel that translating into what you talked about in that painting process.
Yeah, like all you can do is just be grateful for it.
Exactly. Yeah.
I know, Kelly, I've seen you paint from a distance and it looks very meticulous. And I wonder, is that a pleasurable experience for you? Or What is it like? Yeah.
It's both. Yeah, it is definitely painful, as Yen describes. I'm always like contorting my body like around the canvas. But yeah, it's a labor of love for me. It's like even though there's like pain in that experience, or like because things are so meticulous, like it takes such a long time. Sometimes like the experience is not enjoyable. You're just like waiting to the end game. But for me, like going back to your question about this, like finding the beauty and what Emmanuel's talking about, these like surprises. I take things that I find beautiful and then try to like insert my own subjectivity in like how I'm recreating them, or like reimagining them, or reinscribing them. And something that's like really regular becomes more irregular through my subjectivity, through the perception, and also the handedness, that like this quirkiness and those surprises like are what make it more beautiful to me. So I'm like trying to incorporate this like element of randomness, or like yeah, surprise within something that seems already predetermined, or like already very static, and then just sort of suggesting that it's not, and that there's like always this room for play and for pleasure like within that experience.
How about you, Meg?
Yeah, like I was saying, I think there's some pleasure, but in the beginning, and maybe when those surprise elements pop up, but like there's a lot of mundane stuff that that happens. I don't know if I would call it painful, although I do have a habit of working on the floor, which my neck and back do not appreciate. But yeah, I kind of feel like in terms of final product, if the artwork is beautiful to someone, like I'm happy if other people find it, but it feels to me like incidental. Like for me, like art making, the final product is kind of just like some death mask of some investigation. Yeah.
Like it's its own thing, and
yeah, like I guess I don't think very much about, or I try not to think too hard about what the final what the final product will be perceived as, beautiful or ugly or not. But I'm happy if other people find it interesting and take pleasure in it. Yeah. Okay, great. Well, thank you all for sharing your thoughts on beauty today. It's been really wonderful to hear.
Yeah.